a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing. Now, wherever you buy beer, I am John Bonus of Twins Daily, and home, sleeping in, is Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic. That's because Aaron was out late last night at Twins Daily's Winter Meltdown, along with 250 caretakers and supporters of Twins Daily, as well as Minnesota Twins players Ryan Jeffers, Simeon with Richardson, and Twins TV play-by-play announcer Cory Provus. We gathered at the underground music venue a half block from Target Field. We drank some Black Stack beer, celebrated and commiserated about the Twins, and we had Jeffers, Woods, Richardson, and Provus on stage for some really fun interviews, which we recorded and are very happy to bring to you now. So, a little different episode today. We hope you enjoy it. All right, and welcome to Twins Daily's Winter Meltdown. I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
And more importantly,
much more importantly,
we have for you, I was going to make a big deal of the fact that you are the reigning Media Good Guy Award winner, which what that really means is we can guilt him into doing stuff like this.
It's the Brown Noser Award.
But now, in the last 48 hours, he has a bigger title, which is a walk-off initials game winner on Friday.
Let's go.
Which, that sets a high bar for dramatic moments that you can be involved in 2025. Like, you're going to have to come up with a legit walk-off at Target Field.
I'm just starting the year hot, you know?
Yeah.
That's all it's about.
Could be a career year. So, okay. I read an article 2 days ago in The Athletic, plug, and it was about the robo-ump situation for next year, or for spring training. And the plan is, I'm sure you guys have probably heard this already, but that they're going to introduce it in spring training. It's going to be like maybe half the games or something like that. Depends on the ballpark.
It's like 23 of our games are robo-ump.
So, as someone who is, as a hitter, you're influenced by it, obviously, but as a catcher, you're very, very influenced. What are your overall thoughts on that as an idea? And also, if they ever bring it in fully, because it's going to be the challenge system initially, do you feel like that will change the entire way catchers, at least defensively, are sort of evaluated, that throwing will become a lot more important than framing? Because will there even be framing? Because I know when you first got drafted, I talked to you in 2020 maybe, and framing was the huge emphasis. Will that completely go? And what do you, is that taking a tool out of the toolbox of a catcher?
So first off, I don't think it'll ever get to the point where it's the full ABS. I think MLB kind of went down that path and realized it's not where they want to be. Like in tennis, the challenge system adds an element of energy to the game. You know, when one of those tennis players wants to challenge it, you get the slow-mo video on the scoreboard, you get the little shadow on the line, and that's pretty much what they're going to want to do with the strike zone. In spring training, how it works with the challenge system is you have 2 challenges a game. The pitcher, catcher, or batter can actually challenge the pitch. It has to be an instantaneous challenge. You tap your helmet, and it goes to the review. They're going to measure the heights of all of us batters in spring training. And then the bottom of the zone is some percentage off the ground, then the top of the zone is another percentage off the ground. And then it's just, you have 2 challenges a game. If you win it, you keep it. If you lose it, you lose it. And I think it adds a level of excitement to the game that I think MLB wants.
Well, and talking to guys who had spent some time with the Saints last year and then come up, they liked how quick it was, and like you said, how sort of seamless it is. But the zone, I remember talking to Royce Lewis, and he was like, well, we just learned stop swinging at certain sections of the zone that you would normally have to fight off, because you can get, it's so locked in and it really never changes. Where, do you guys have, if you know the ump for that day's game or even the next day's game, are there umpire scouting reports? I'm kind of assuming the answer.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we get heat maps for each umpire, and I think you're still with the challenge system. You still get some of that human element from the umpires. From this guy has a little different zone than this guy might have. But you're going to eliminate some of the big time misses, the big calls that 90% of the ballpark know were wrong, that you can kind of just challenge real quick. But you can change those. Yes, Angel, he's no longer in the game, okay? He retired. He retired on his own fruition. He was not forced out. He retired.
With probably an amazing pension.
A great severance package, all of the above. But I think it'll add an excitement level to the game. I think players it's going to be something we're going to have to learn how to use. Some players might lose the chance to challenge if they're really bad at it, because you only got two. If you lose one in the first inning and you got one for the rest of the game, you kind of. So I'm sure there's going to be some rules, some strategy that's going to be built around that. But then to go back to your first question, the receiving thing, I think it's not going to change it drastically with only having the challenge system. Our jobs are still going to be important back there. The skills might shift a little bit, but I think there's going to be another level of responsibility that we take on with knowing what pitches to challenge and what not to.
How important is it going to be that only the three people that can challenge it are the pitcher, the batter, the catcher, and the manager is not one of them, right? And you're speaking for the team with one of your two challenges, and in the moment that is called a strike, and you didn't think it was a strike, and you've got some fairly impetuous reactions at that particular moment, they're absolutely going to go crazy, and you can just see the manager in the dugout just rubbing his temples. It's the second batter of the first inning. What are we doing?
Rocco's just going to stare at you and intimidate you from the. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of learning curve from players of how to handle that. I think there will probably be some rules in place of don't use it before the third inning or like I said, I'm sure some players might lose the chance to challenge a call.
You see this in the NBA. Like I remember Patrick Beverly a couple years ago for the Wolves. Every fall he'd be like, challenge. And at some point, Chris Finch, the coach, just stopped, acted if he wasn't there. And even like Anthony Edwards.
As if he didn't have a right hand anymore.
Yeah, so there's going to be trustworthy and not trustworthy, I guess. But it's also the catcher is going to be put into the big spot. I mean, realistically, if a batter has more than one of those a game, that's going to be pretty rare. Whereas a catcher, I mean, even if an ump is doing a decent job, there's going to be a half dozen on both sides that are that's probably.
I think they averaged, Sim might be able to answer this a little bit better. I think they averaged 10-ish a game, 10 challenges a game, something like that. So it's not super, super common, and I'm sure that honestly might make the umpires better as they start to learn the zone a little bit more. We might phase out some of the really bad umpires. Some of the really bad umpires might be tired of getting exposed every game, because if they're missing a bunch of calls and we're challenging them, they might get tired of missing 20 a game. It's going to be a fun element.
I don't get a sense that the bad umpires...
Yeah, they don't care.
That
was John saying that, not Ryan Jeffers.
Eventually people get tired of being embarrassed, though. So, no matter who you are, if you constantly, they weren't never embarrassed before. Now all of a sudden, people can challenge you on the spot. It might get a little awkward, but
I mean, really, and I've been saying this since I was in Little League. An umpire is just a narc, right? And so, what is the personality that grows up and says, I want to do referee, umpire? Anyway, again, that was me, not Ryan Jefferson. Has framing, what you work on framing wise, or how they teach it, changed at all since you came out, in 2020 when you were first in camp? I remember you had Tanner Swanson, is that his name? Who got poached by the Yankees right away. He was one of the first guys that I can remember who was this guy's amazing at teaching framing. And in the early days, there was such a gap between the worst framers and the best framers. But I guess sort of like you guys were talking about for umpires, the very worst get weeded out once everything is quantified over and over again. And so I feel like the bar for framing has been raised, but so I'm wondering, as that's happened over the past 4 or 5 years, it's become a much bigger part of how every catcher is evaluated. Has the way you work on it, or even how you set up trying to get calls, has that changed? Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, the framing, because it's very dependent on a lot of things that are out of our control as a catcher. Dependent on the pitching staff you have. We have a pitching staff that's heavy on guys that are relying on more pitching to halves versus pitching to corners, or pitching to working pitches that are start as balls and end as strikes, or pitches that are stealable pitches. So I think it's a very dependent stat on a lot of external factors. We were talking a little bit earlier, the teams might have a philosophy where
as a catcher, they want you sitting a little bit more middle, and it's harder to steal pitches that way versus a team that might want their catchers to move off the plate a little bit here, off the plate a little bit there, and it's going to be a lot more favorable for them to steal pitches. So evaluating catchers is really hard, and I don't think anyone's really got it right, just because there's a lot of variables in there that you can't really quantify.
Well, and along those lines, like you've shaved down pop time, which is just how long it takes him to transfer and throw and get the ball to second. It's not going to sound like a lot, but to shave, 0.1 seconds or something is huge. But even when you do that, your caught stealing numbers can fluctuate a lot because it's about the pitcher, it's about the batter. Then they changed the rules on you a couple years ago, obviously.
Yeah, I averaged a really good pop time last year. I put a lot of work into that side. I've become a really good thrower. But I think I still only threw out like 12% of base stealers. Like, it seems like such a small number, but there's so much that is out of our control as catchers. We try and do our best to put the throw in the bag as often as we can in a good time. And then after that, a lot of it's out of our hands. It goes to the pitcher's time to the plates, how they hold the runners. And then sometimes, like, runners are so fast, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, the league-wide rate went up 5% when they changed the rule. And then I noticed last year a lot of your throws and Vasquez's throws, you were, I think, intentionally putting them sometimes up the line a little bit, especially when Correa was out there doing the tagging, because that actually gets there quicker. And if you can count on someone like Correa to make a slap tag, you're getting the guy 5 feet earlier.
Yeah, and that's kind of just playing the percentage games. You can sit and break it down into a little grid, and you can give you a percentage of the caught stealing where you miss, and missing up the line gives you a much better chance to throw the guy out, even more so than like a throw that's directly over the base.
You worked out this Twins Daily's pretty prospect-heavy website. And so we've got a lot of interest in Walker Jenkins, but we have not seen Walker Jenkins up close. You have seen Walker Jenkins up close. You've been working out with him, I understand, this offseason. What are your impressions on him and his future? And to start with your impressions.
Yeah, he's a guy that everyone should be really excited for. It's not very often where the talent on the field matches up with the person and the intangibles that come with it off the field. He's an extremely humble young kid, but he's just so freakishly talented that it's not often you see those two go together. Just the stature, the size, sheer size of him is just, you can't fathom him only being 19 years old.
What do they do in North Carolina? What are they doing?
We breed them good,
You
we
got
breed them
big
good down
dudes
there.
Yeah, what's the water in North Carolina? Anyway, yeah, are major leaguers for the most part, and maybe this just varies a lot, because I know I've talked to Correa about prospects, and he's super into it because he likes the team building stuff. And you seem pretty knowledgeable about it. But in general, when a guy walks in from even AAA or AA, do you feel like the majority of the people in a clubhouse differentiate between, oh yeah, I saw this guy in camp, he looked pretty good, versus, oh, this guy's like a top X prospect, a top whatever prospect?
Yeah, I think when you start looking at that, the dudes, the top 5 prospects in the league, there's just some, you can tell they're just more developed than their peers. There's some great hitters, great pitchers that just look like your average Joe, and then they might roll out there and throw 100 or hit 30 pumps a year. But then there's the ones that look like Walker Jenkins and are just different.
Speaking of people walking into the clubhouse, so what is I guess I call it the onboarding process for a catcher, either when you claim a pitcher off waivers and he shows up, you trade for a guy, or a rookie Festa, let's say, gets called up midseason. I'm guessing you've caught him or seen him in spring training, but is there a process where you just kind of sit down with him and say, what do you throw? How often do you throw it? Or is that something that the coaches will sort of guide you both through and say, this is going to be the plan for this guy?
I think it's all the above. If it's a starter, we usually have a couple days notice. We'll have a little bit of time to sit down maybe a day or so before and look at some of his profile, his information, the stuff that's on paper. Look at the movement plots, the percentages of usage, where he likes to throw each pitch. And then you got to just sit down with him and have a real conversation about, hey, in this situation, what do you like to use? When you're behind, what do you like to use? And do your best to learn as much about him on the fly. I always tell the young guys that come up or the new guys, like, hey, feel free, like, shake me off as much as you can. Like, normally I have no ego when you shake me off. Like, hopefully we'll get to the point where you're not shaking me off because I know what you want to throw. But until that point, like, that's how I'm going to learn you. That's how I'm going to learn how you like to approach different situations. But I mean, that's part of my job. Is to learn those guys as quick as I can.
I feel like that's probably the most, because that's one of the few catcher-related things, or really just anything in baseball, that you either can't quantify or there isn't even an attempt to quantify, which is game calling. And I think people sometimes think that that's being done from the dugout, and it's not. I mean, you guys are going over stuff pregame that you're sticking to a lot of the time, but I just know a lot of times, whether it's like Pablo, Chris Paddock, whoever, a rookie, a veteran, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, yeah, we got to the third inning, and we saw the swings they had against the 3 changeups, and, you know, I talked to Jeffers, and we said, let's throw a whole bunch more of those, or let's not throw any more of those. And there isn't a way to really quantify that. I mean, maybe 10 years from now there will be, but I can't even think of how you would quantify it.
We have a funny stat that they call, like, sticking to the plan stat. You know, you got some intern following the pitches, see, like, what the plan we wrote out pregame, and then they can track, okay, how well do they stick on that plan? But like you said, game calling is extremely hard to quantify because there's a lot of feel involved. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of respect from me to the pitcher that has to go on when calling a game. You're having a full conversation just with buttons. It used to be fingers, but you're having a full conversation just with buttons. And usually it's, for me, and for other catchers, you're not thinking like, hey, what's next? You're setting up pitches down the line with what you're calling now and what you've seen in the past. And there's a lot that goes into calling the game, and it's like you said, it's one of the things that kind of goes under the radar of what we have to do.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past, you can tell me how stupid this is, all right?
It's stupid.
Oh, you're fitting in great on this show because that's all I do, really.
You're going to be perfect, yeah. In poker, there's been a movement recently that you know how to play a hand and how you should play a hand, etc., similar to having a game plan as a pitcher. But there's been a movement such that some poker players are doing, they will try to act randomly. Rather than stick to the plan, like you're talking about, they will deliberately abandon a plan completely, and they'll just make their bets based on, you know, if it's 543 or 544, something like that. Like they find some random generator that they can use. At the poker
game
table.
theory optimal is the.
Okay, is that what it's called? All right.
I've lost a lot of money at Canterbury trying to play.
And we have speculated, like, how effective would that be as a catcher? If rather than trying to stick to a game plan, you literally just had, you know, you get a random generator in the dugout or something, and they're just telling you, now he throws this. Now, this is what the dial showed. And as somebody who's both been a catcher and a hitter, what do you think of that idea?
I think it's a really interesting topic because there's a lot of value in being random. You know, we just as much information that we have on them as they have on our pitchers. So they'll know what pitch Joe Ryan throws in this count most commonly and what he likes to follow up with. When he throws a fastball, does he like to follow up with this type of pitch? You know, they know that stuff. We know that stuff, and I think it's part of the scouting reports is knowing your own pitchers and knowing if they fall into patterns. But there's a fine balance between, like, hey, this guy can't hit a fastball. He hasn't hit a fastball He hasn't hit a fastball up and in 2 weeks. Okay, he looked like he was close, but, like, how much credit do you put into one swing? Like, you have to constantly weigh that battle of what you see, what your eyes are telling you, versus what the numbers are saying of, like, what he has hit and what he hasn't hit.
Yeah, because that is the classic, like, Twitter second guess of they threw him 2 fastballs and he swung through both of them. What the hell are they throwing him a curveball for? Yeah, but if the batter knows you're just going to endlessly throw him fastballs, at some point, if you can eliminate, now I know, I mean, maybe you're this way too, like if you can go up there and either through scouting and numbers or just watching a guy the first couple times he faces you and say, like, I don't think he's going to throw me a slider. I just don't think, especially maybe early in the count or with 2 strikes, whatever it is. I feel like if you can eliminate one of 3 or 4 possibilities, that simplifies stuff to the point that, I mean, you tell me again. Tell me if this is
it's the separator in a lot of guys that you face is the more pitches a guy can throw, the more commonly. You know, if a guy can throw 4 pitches 25% of the time throughout his outing, makes it a lot harder to figure out what he's going to throw you. If you can throw a 2-0 changeup, if you can throw a 1-1 curveball, you just completely having the ability to throw any pitch, any count is a huge attribute that separates a lot of starters. There's just a lot of value in being random, but just really having to walk that fine line of like, okay, this guy can hit something or he can't. Like,
right.
Well, I mean, we're going to have Simeon up here in a minute, and I think he's a pretty good example of what you're saying. Like, he clearly has a starter's pitch mix. Like, last year he also had a big jump and stuff too, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. But I think he got, 20 to 25% whiff rate on all 4 of his pitches. And, some were better than others, obviously, and I'm going to ask him about that when he's up here. But that's a great example of, like, he got his fastball up to mid-90s, which was a big jump for him. But the fact that he can not only throw 4, but throw 4 pitches, 4 strikes, and actually command them and hit specific parts of the zone, when guys, and the Twins have had a lot of success moving guys from the rotation to the bullpen. I mean, Jax is almost every great reliever, going back to like Rick Aguilera, Joe Nathan, Taylor Rogers, obviously, Eddie Guardado, in Twins history has been a starter. Is that, like when it got, and Cole Sands was a great example last year too, although Cole Sands kind of kept a starter's pitch mix, and I would kind of argue Griffin Jax has a deeper bag now than he did as a starter. It's just that everything is souped up.
Deeper than most starters.
Yeah.
Do, yeah.
Well, and which is why all offseason there was speculation, and he gave a quote yesterday at the media luncheon saying, yeah, I talked to Rocco about it. I was into starting, but everyone kind of came to an agreement. And I'm curious, not talk about anybody specifically, but are we at the point now with the Twins where when they move a guy, I mean, Varland might be an example this year. I don't think it's been ruled out that he's going to be a starter, but you look at him and you just go, man, if you can just let this guy eat for like 15, 20 pitches at a time, I mean, he can be 100 plus a mid-90s cutter. I mean, like, are we at the point now with all the data where you can almost like put the equation together for an effective relief pitcher, almost like sight unseen, just based on what you see and what you can kind of eliminate from their bag as a starter? You ditch the 2 worst performing pitches or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis for sure, but if you've got good stuff, there's a level of feel that you have to have as a starter. And some guys have the stuff but don't have the feel. Some guys have the feel but don't have the stuff. As a starter, you kind of have to have both. You got to have the feel, and you got to have good stuff to get guys out. As a bullpen guy, you can just have stuff. And when you're able to, and you used Louis as an example, and he's had success starting, he's had success relieving. When you're able to go tell a guy that already throws 96, 97, hey, go get 3 outs, he can throw as hard as he can and dump the tank and be extremely successful. We saw it with Duran. He was a starter his whole career until he got to the big leagues and was really one of the best closers in the game. So there's a lot of value in, but I think it's a lot of relievers also kind of might want to jump back to starting if they have that type of repertoire.
That's a tricky thing. I mean, from like a money-making standpoint, a great closer as a free agent, well, Josh Hader a couple years ago,
sure.
Elite closer. He got a huge contract for a closer.
Right.
But it's like, number 3 starter money or something. And so it's tricky. And you would like to think with someone like Jax or whoever it is, well, okay, he's taken his game to another level, move back into the rotation, give that a try. We can always move him back to the bullpen. But I don't know if it's that simple. Like, I don't know that you can just flip that switch from he's going to have to stretch out. There's durability issues. And so the worst thing that you can do is, and I'm not talking about Jack specifically, but move a guy who's been a great reliever to the rotation, realize 3-4 months later, okay, he can't quite maintain that. Well, let's move him back to the bullpen. And if you lose that elite effectiveness, so I don't know, it's a tricky thing. And I think a lot of times, I know when I'm writing about prospects, the comment section will always be like, how come on half these starters you basically say, oh, he'll either be a 4th starter or a good setup man?
Right.
It's like, well, that's kind of the choice at this point for a lot of guys, and that's what separates the Joe Ryans, Bailey Obers, Pablo Lopez, because their stuff has ticked up. They also can throw strikes. They also have 4+ pitches, and I feel like from a second, third time through the lineup, and actually Simeon did a good job with that last year. I think with any rookie, they were very careful with him early on to get him through twice and sort of reevaluate. And then there were so many other injuries to the rotation that he kind of had to stretch out a little bit. And I looked at his numbers last night preparing for this, and like second time through was basically the same as first time through. And so how much of that is part of the equation of like maybe this guy would be better in this role than that role?
I think there's a lot of like these starters in the minor leagues that are getting tons of outs, tons of strikeouts, are really good in the minors. That doesn't mean that they're at all going to mean that they're going to have any success starting in the big leagues. You know, and Sim, I know will attest to this. Like the big leagues is a completely different animal than anything you'll do in the minor leagues. So these starters, you got to give them a shot in the big leagues. You got to give them a shot to figure it out, see how the stuff plays, see if you can make some changes once they get there. If they struggle, maybe they don't struggle. Maybe it works out great and everything is rainbows and butterflies. But it's a different game. It's a learning curve for a lot of these young pitchers. And then once they get to that middle ground of like, hey, they've been effective as a starter, but we'd like to see more. We know there's more in the tank. Maybe we evaluate, hey, what do we think they can do in a shorter basis?
That's there is a sabermetric acronym about that. INSTAP.
Yeah. No, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect.
That's right.
Starter prospect, basically.
You just have trouble. They are harder to project than hitters. Like that's just the way it is. You don't know how it's going to play up once they get to that level.
I mean, you've also seen it with all the rookies that have come up across the league as hitters. You know, it's a different game. You know, you got like the kid from the Orioles, the Holiday, like
right.
killing it in the minors, and he comes up and he struggles. He's going to be a generational player. He's going to be an amazing baseball player. But there's a big learning curve that everybody that comes to the big leagues has to go through.
I hate to say this, we got time for about one more, then we're going to get out. So
okay, well, I'm going to go to my most important question.
Sure,
so
give me the hard hitters.
Every year, I got two.
It's all been a little softball lob up so far.
On the Jumbotron, I don't know if you ever look up there while you're batting, but on the Jumbotron, it would often say that this is a quote. It would say Ryan Jeffers has all the stats and everything, got his picture up there, and it would say, quote, thinks people who sleep with socks on exhibit psychopath behavior. So before you say that, let me get a show of hands right now. Let me get a show of hands. If you are
who sleeps with socks on?
Who sleeps with socks on? Okay, we have some authorities coming around these people.
Get them out of here.
Now, I happen to agree with you. But is this I feel like the fact that because I think these come from like the spring training surveys that they do together.
Yes.
It makes me think maybe this is a point of controversy in your household.
No. Okay. So that was one of the questions was do you sleep with socks on?
Yeah.
The next part of this scoreboard thing is mine always said that, and then Carlos Santana would come up, and it would just say, he sleeps with socks on.
Yeah. I'm on yours. I don't want to know how you sleep, John. Don't tell me. But I'm on Team Jeffers for that. I feel like it's a disaster to sleep with your socks on. Like, unless you're in an igloo or something.
My point.
Anyway, every time they would show that, I would be like, yes, he's correct, no matter what your stats were. Here's something I've always wondered also, now that we're on the hard-hitting, literally. Is it an unsaid agreement between catchers and umpires? Now we're going to say something nice about umpires. When there is, let's say, a foul tip to a bad spot, say it like that, a nut shot. They always come out and they brush the plate. If it happens to the umpire,
it's a non-written.
You go
rule
walk
kind
out.
Of, I'd say if you hear, it's just a common courtesy kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to know
if Angel Hernandez gets hit, you might hang back there a little bit longer. But
you're like, I don't want to.
No, he's a great guy.
Okay.
Retired with honors.
As a last one, we didn't talk that much about this upcoming season, obviously, but
go for it.
No secret, you guys ended a way you didn't want to end last year. Do you feel like, and there's still time, we talked to Falvey yesterday, and he was very adamant that, you guys ask me these same questions every year, why haven't we done anything? And then every year before spring training, or sometimes during spring training, Donovan Solano comes walking in the door, or whoever it is. But as it stands now, I feel like the talking point for this team is that the core that's in place can win and has won, including 2/3 of the way through last season. For fans out there who were, distressed by what they saw the last, 5 or 6 weeks, what is your take on it, or the overall vibe, I guess, among players of like, do we have all we need here to do it? And I guess what has been learned from what happened, either physically from like a durability standpoint, or just mentally from like a grind standpoint? Because I know a lot of the guys who struggled, some were veterans, but this was their first pennant race, basically.
Yeah, I think for the first part of that, I think the big boys, when I say the big boys, the Dodgers, the Yankees, like they get to play in the beginning of spring training. That's when they make their moves. That's when they go spend the millions and millions of dollars that most teams don't have. So it's not. I don't think anyone's super surprised that this is kind of when stuff for us starts stirring up. But I think, like you mentioned, the core that we have from guys that have kind of come through the minors together and shown last year through whatever it was, 120 games, that we were arguably one of the top 3 teams in the league. We've shown what we can be. We've shown how good we can be, and we can show how much baseball we can win when we put it all together. We struggled a lot last year to put it together consistently, and I can't sit up here and tell you why that was. We're getting a question a lot of like, hey, what do you learn from that? I think what can you learn from that? I don't think we can sit here and say this is what happened. I think you got to flip the page, turn to next year, and maybe mix up your routine a little bit or whatever that might be. But baseball is a really up and down sport, and trying to level it out is a really hard thing to nail down.
I feel like like if you were to try to, I don't know, pace yourself, I don't mean you, but like as a team, whether it's fewer reps in spring training, more days off. But I feel like you guys, for the most part, under Rocco, have done a pretty, you're closer to the top of the league than the bottom on days off once a week for guys. Obviously, the catcher spot has been sort of more of a timeshare. But ultimately, I don't know that like you said, there's so much involved here.
I don't think it was a physical exhaustion or the team physically falling apart. Honestly, who knows? Maybe we go to spring training and we get more at bats. We started 7-13, whatever, not where we wanted to start. Right. Maybe we do more in spring training. Maybe there's less off days. Maybe we push guys a little bit harder. You look at the guys, the teams that are in it every year. I mean, they're running out arguably the same 9 every game. So maybe it's less of the physically taxing side. Maybe it's the other direction. I don't know. That's for the people up top to decide.
More bus trips for you? Is that what you're advocating for?
Maybe we got to bus to Chicago versus fly to Chicago.
I'm saying spring training.
Maybe we got to go back to
Clearwater,
getting the hammocks on the bus and everything.
All right. First one on the bus to Jupiter. Good. Thanks very much for coming, hanging out. Everybody, let's give a big hand for Ryan.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Our first sponsor is Black Stack Brewing, our presenting sponsor of Gleeman the Geek, also a sponsor of the Twins Daily Winter Meltdown. The recordings that you have just heard were fueled in part by Black Stack Brewing beer. Local 755 was there. Slopes French Pilsner was there.
That's where John got all his personality that day from that beer. Black Stack. We talk about them a lot because, like you said, they're our presenting sponsor. They've been with us for a while, and they're going to be with us for a while because they're a great sponsor. They're a legit good beer.
You get to hang out with the owner and general manager of the Black Stack Brewing.
It's a thrill.
It's going to be fun.
I'm going to find out some things about you that he surely knows. So the deal with Black Stack is they have an actual brew, like a location that you can go drink there. True, it's like 94 and 280. Great spot.
Yes.
Bonuses there like 6-7 times a week.
We'll probably do an event there at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
You do an event there. You and Chrissy. But the other thing that we're getting the word out about is that they've gotten wide distribution locally. Right. Yes. And I don't just mean Twin Cities, in the surrounding areas. And so the odds are you can find them in local liquor stores. And if not, they're in a situation where you can say to your local liquor store, hey, look into getting Black Stack, and they can hook it up.
That's correct.
So Black Stack Brewing, 94 and 280 if you want to drink it in person, or just ask for it or look for it at your local liquor store because they're widely distributed.
You can try the local 755 and the French Slopes Pilsner, or the Slopes French Pilsner that they had at the Winter Meltdown at your own home. Just grab a case at your local liquor store. You're going to be blown away by this one. This is we got John Bonus of Twins Daily, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic, and
another award winner.
Yes, the
Twins Rookie of the Year reigning. way more impressive than media good guy. Now that Ryan has left,
as opposed to kissing the butts of the media.
Right.
Sure.
You cannot kiss butts to a Rookie of the Year award.
No, you're right.
You can be nice to me and Dan Hayes and whoever, but that's an award you have to actually earn. Now that he's out of here, I'll say that. So congratulations on that.
He answers the tough questions, all right?
Hey, he gets up after we asked him the last question. He goes, "You didn't ask me any hard questions." I was like, "Well, I don't know."
I was like, well, which teammate do you hate the most?
Yeah.
We'll start with that one, Simeon.
Well,
who really grinds your gears?
He can't even say Jeffers as a joke because
he's a good guy.
You're not here now.
It's a battery, mate. You can't really piss off your catcher. But the thing I want to start with asking you about was, you began last year with the Saints, and you were coming off what I think you probably said was a disappointing year for you the previous year. But I remember in spring training, everybody, including you, were buzzing about how much your velocity had jumped, and you felt like you had made some mechanical adjustments. But here's the thing, as a writer, best shape of their life is a thing that every player says every spring. So we heard that about you, and we were like, okay, I'll put that in the back of my mind before games had started. But it's like, okay, there's 20 guys in camp who say, I worked on this, I added a pitch, I did that. Then when the actual game started, you were, mid-90s instead of 92, 93 or whatever. And pretty quickly you get pushed into the rotation then. DeSclafani gets hurt in camp, and then Louis Varland struggled. When you got that call in your mind, coming off a good spring, and I'm sure you felt more confident with your stuff just than you had the previous year, did you feel like this is my job to take and keep, or did you feel like I just got to keep my head above water here? I got to just contribute and see how it's going, because you hadn't at that point stuck in the majors yet, obviously. And then, fast forward four months and you're, part of the leading guys in the rotation. So what was your mindset when you first got the call of you're going to jump into this rotation?
Well, first and foremost, let's help this team win,
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So that was my first initial thought was, okay, you get the call, have enough confidence to go in there and say it's your spot, mean it, believe it, and help the team win. I say it as it may sound a lot, but that's really my main priority every time I touch the ball is to give y'all guys a fighting chance to win. So
and you did that first outing. That first outing was a win. That was your first major league win.
Yeah, it sure was.
Was on 2000. That was that April 13th win. I talked to you, I think, like on day 2 or day 3 of spring training, and I talked to you because I'd had a couple people tell me, Richardson's velocity is way up. And I was like, and you and I had a long conversation about what adjustments you had made to try to do that. Both you and the team had made some adjustments trying to get back to some of your previous rotation, try to use some of your natural athletic ability a little bit more. Some things that you might have worked on in previous years you were kind of ditching, is the impression I got. We can talk about that, but what I really want to know is, was there a moment last offseason or spring or whenever where you realized, oh, yeah, this is working? Was there a bullpen outing, or was there somebody showed you some readings, or there was something like that? Was there a moment where you're like, no, this really hit? Or was it just sort of a gradual, I'm not sure I really believe this is working, but, here we are. I don't know. What was the process like for you kind of emotionally?
Well, I think it was having the confidence to just know that I had to change my arm slot and be okay with that, and be an athlete on the mound and use those attributes on the mound. It wasn't until spring training where we start facing guys and I can actually see results from the hard work.
Interesting.
And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is working now. Like you said, it's working now. So I think it was a mixture of just practicing it in the off season, trying to get it to be muscle memory. And then for me, it was until it was in the games and spring training games where I could actually see it come to life.
That's interesting, because when I talked to you, you already kind of seemed to be feeling that way. Like, hey, things are going that way. And I think others in the organization had seen that and had already believed in it. It's interesting to me, and I've heard this from other pitchers as well. You might think you've got something, But until you get into a dual situation with the batter a couple times, you don't know if you've really got something.
Exactly. It's like going to war, you know?
Yep.
You don't know what you don't know until you go in the ring and try to fight somebody.
That's right.
So it's one of those things where I wanted to see where I was at and could compete with one and somebody else. And I think that's when I finally realized, I was like, okay, you can't think about the mechanics. You can't think about any of that. Just go out there and compete. So once I could realize I had both mixtures working with me together, that's when it kind of came into play.
Was there an outing or a batter in spring training that stuck out to you where you kind of went, that didn't used to happen? That way?
I think when I went 0.00 ERA is when I was like, you know what? Maybe there was something in this.
It's a pretty good sign.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You mentioned the arm slot, and I looked this up. So you were 2 years ago. Compared to last year, you went from 71 degrees to 47 degrees. And if people just think of like a 90-degree angle, you can see it's a little different. Would you say what you ended up with last year was more of like your natural slot, like even going back to like high school days or early minors days, or was it still somewhat of an adjustment to be like, this is going to be the new normal for me?
I think it was always there. I was a two-way guy coming up in high school. I'm going to play third base and shortstop. So it was one of those things where that was my natural arm slot.
Okay.
And as I just chose pitching as a career, it kind of just fluctuated up. And until I got a side-by-side of, you were up here. Now let's try to get you back to the athlete that you were. So it was one of those things I had to look at the data, look at the pictures, look at film, and kind of just bring that old athlete back to life a little bit.
Was that something that you had consciously tried to do? Had you consciously tried to raise your arm slot? I thought maybe like from a deception standpoint or something like that, maybe working on the off-speed stuff. Were you consciously those first few years trying to move your arm up a little bit, and then finally what happened last year was like, that's not working?
I think it was unintentionally deceptive.
Huh. Okay.
I don't think I didn't mean to do it by any means.
Okay.
It just gradually went up across the years.
Interesting.
So once the film was presented to me, and said, hey, dude, you're kind of touching the mountaintops up there. Let's kind of bring it back down a little bit. That was when I really knew. I was like, get back to natural habitat.
And then the other thing is, like, by changing that, you hope to add velo, you hope to add, different angle that the batter has to deal with, but also the way your pitches are interacting with that. Because I remember, even before the Twins traded for you, the scouting report was really good changeup. And this is when you were probably still a teenager or whatever at that point. And you had success with your changeup at times last year, but I feel like the slider is what emerged a lot more as a rookie with the Twins last year than the changeup. Is that an example of you just maturing in something that worked the best at 19 may not be your best weapon at 22, 23? Or is that a situation where you go from here to here, different look, different spin, different characteristics of the pitch, and then you realize, oh, actually the slider is going to pair or tunnel the best or whatever with the fastball from this angle?
It's funny you say that. The slider really wasn't my pitch to begin with. It was always been the changeup.
Right.
But when I lowered the arm slot, it was kind of one of those things where I had to relearn every pitch feel from that slot. So even the fastball, the curveball, the changeup, the slider, everything I had to kind of relearn again. And it just worked out to that slider was a good swing and miss pitch this whole last year. So I guess tunneling, like as you're saying, tunneling with the same effect as the fastball, it had some good deception to it.
You threw basically, although at the end of the year you started mixing in, I feel like more of a traditional curveball a little bit more. What was maybe you were throwing it, 15% of the time, something like that, compared to a handful of game earlier in the season. Was that like a conscious thing, like from the coaching staff maybe, of we think where you're at now, the results you're getting now, if we add this to the mix a little bit more, it can pair with this or that? Or was it just, hey, let's try this? Or you had a few good swings and misses on it, and you tried to amp it up. What was the process to get to like August and September and double the usage of that?
I really think it was just gauging the reads of the hitters throughout the season, kind of gathering data of saying, okay, they're doing this against it. Let's try to do this a little bit more. So it can set up, like you're saying, set up for everything else. And it gives them a different look. It gives them a different direction. It moves their eyesight up. It changes their point of view on the plate. So it kind of just gives different perspectives of attacking hitters a little bit easier.
Do you have a best pitch that you consider at this point, or is it fluid, like start to start, matchup based, all that stuff?
I pride myself on throwing all 4 pitches for strikes. So it could be one day it's the curveball, one day it's the changeup, one day it's the slider, one day it's the heater. But I've been a Swiss Army knife for quite a while now. So it's.
I mean, I can tell you from talking to Rocco post game, after your starts, whatever, that was consistently what he would cite is, yeah, he's a rookie. Yeah, he's young. We know he's going to throw strikes. And so it's like you didn't get yourself into trouble. And like you said at the very beginning, like, give your team a chance to win. And early on, it was like, we can get this guy through 4, get him into the 5th. But I did feel like, once you were 15 starts in, they started leaning on you because, honestly, by the end of the season, you weren't even one of the 2 or 3 least experienced guys in the rotation. You were one of the veterans. You got Zebby or Fester or whoever coming up, and you're like, let me show you the ropes.
How does that work,
I've been here for 4 months. Let me show you everything.
Right.
But I do feel like, as you said, it may seem obvious pitchers should throw strikes, but there aren't that many rookies who very rarely get themselves into trouble. And so I guess as you look to build, and I think you threw 147 innings combined last year, AAA and the majors, most of them in the majors, obviously, which was a career high. Did you, by the end of the season, could you feel like this is a career high? Like I'm in deeper water than I'd ever been swimming before?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the fun part of it, the challenge of, okay, this is the most I've ever gone, how many starts I've ever made, but let's get through the season. And it doesn't matter if I go 1 inning or go 7 innings. Again, my job has always been giving the team a chance to fight. And that's always been my mentality, always will be my mentality, because that's the type of player I am. It doesn't really matter.
So as you roll out of that first year, get 147 innings, go through a full major league season, etc., and you look forward to the second year, doing that again, trying to rack up another 600 plus plate appearances.
Right.
And what was sort of the thought process this off season? What's the thought process this spring? Is there something new you want to do? Is it more of the same? What's your strategy, I guess, right now for the 2025 season?
Well, finish how I started. For me, that was the biggest goal of mine of, one, be blessed enough to have a healthy season. I think every starter wants to go 30-plus starts, especially for you guys, If our rotation can go 30-plus starts, we have a really damn good chance to win. Right? So
You've gotten way more applause breaks than Jeffers, just if we're keeping track.
He's the good guy, right? So I think more so rinse and repeat. Still do the same thing I did last year, having the confidence and conviction that I had. Still working the same mechanical stuff, just so I can perfect that as my craft as I become a pitcher in the major leagues.
Big overhauls, a lot of little adjustments and such as needed. That's sort of the thought process.
Right. Just go as we go. I just have to say, having the confidence, conviction. We already did it once, so having my feet wet a little bit, reading all the hitters, watching games again. I'm a student of the game, so I go back and watch every game, every start. Go watch their body language, go watch to see what they were doing, just to see, kind of get their approach a little bit, just so I can put that in the back of my head and we can keep going.
It is funny with starters. I feel like the durability and the innings count and all that is a thing right until a point it isn't. And 2 years ago, it was a thing for Bailey Ober. Last year, I can tell you nobody cared about that with Bailey Ober. He threw 180 innings or whatever. But it was such a big deal the year before where they're managing innings, and every time he would have a not great start, it's like, oh, do you think you're wearing down? And so we're asking you this stuff. It's very possible once you get into that deeper water, you can get out there.
Right.
It's like, okay, you got to 147, you can get to 160, 165 or whatever. And there's evidence of that. And I can tell you, like, Bailey Ober didn't answer very many questions about that down the stretch last year because he was just doing it. And that's the beauty, I feel like, with you can sort of, as you were saying, you can let your performance kind of speak for itself at that point. And you're not, believe me, I mean, you are far from the only rookie starter who gets to September in a season at your career high and you're like, all right, I can feel it. Like, it's a little different here. But I feel like if that same group who had a September where they could feel the career high, if they stay healthy, like you said, it's much easier once you've checked that box to be like, okay, now I just got to add 15 more innings here. And then I'm in good shape.
I mean, first and foremost, Bailey Ober had a hell of a season, right?
I
mean, hell of a season. So, like you said, credit to him. He was just doing it. He didn't care. He didn't have any complaints. He just said, give me the ball and let's go win. Like, that was his thought process. And he was one of our soldiers for us in this rotation. So, like you said, checking that box and say, we can't say we haven't done it. Because it's at this point, it's more learning and conditioning for your body for the second half of the season.
I was going to say it's like training to run a marathon. Yeah. But as you guys may have guessed, I've never even thought about training to run a marathon. But theoretically, in my head, it's like training to once you get to like the certain mile, it's like, okay, I know my body didn't abandon me at that point. Right. Or like for me, like walking up on a stage. It's like, okay, I knew I did that once. This is a little bit relates to what we were talking about Ryan with earlier, which is the interaction between a pitcher and the catchers. And one of the things covering the team that I've sort of been exposed to that I didn't realize the extent of is all the stuff that's going on pregame, especially with the starting pitchers, mapping it out, but then also the ability that you guys have to get, once through the lineup and then go, no, forget all that. Like, this isn't working, or this is working, or they got way too good of swings on this, and adjust it. How much of like the pregame plan, whether it was with Jeffers or Vasquez, played a part in that? And then how often did you get through, 2 innings and just say, let's meet again here in the dugout and switch things up and go forward? Like, what is the sort of, and maybe as a rookie, is it hard to push for that? Like, is it hard to say, let's change this, as opposed to just have blinders on and stick to whatever the pregame plan was?
I think what Ryan said really well was, he said, don't be afraid to shake me off. If it's clear something's not working and you feel like we have to go do something else, let's go do it. And I think that's like the fun part about being a pitcher is I kind of relate it to being a quarterback. There's somebody, you're trying to read a defense, you're going to call a different play, you're going to do something else, you might feel a gut instinct, you might do this, you might do that. And that's what I love about pitching. Is you never know, like you said, there's scouting report, we'll go meet beforehand and we'll go over first time through, third time through, second time through. If he does this, if he does that, he might be looking for this, he might be looking for that. And that's kind of the beautiful part of it and the fun part of it. And when you get in the game, you let the scouting report play. And until you start seeing their approach may be completely different. And you jump in and be like, hey, wait a minute, I saw this, what do you see? And we kind of talk back and forth. And, I mean, I give Ryan so much credit because he has to do that with all of us, And
it is crazy that catcher is the only spot that is in hitters' meetings and pitchers' meetings 100%.
He has to do it with all of us.
And like a quarterback, you've got an offensive coordinator in your ear, right? That's where the catcher is doing. And then you get up to the line, and you might have to call an audible. I do not want to throw that pitch right now.
Absolutely.
No, that pitch stinks right now.
That was one thing Sonny Gray, going back a couple years post-game, whether he pitched well or not, his big thing that he would constantly talk about was having conviction in every pitch.
Absolutely.
It doesn't do anyone any good if you're just throwing it because the catcher signaled for it.
Absolutely.
Or if we know we want to throw X percentage to this guy. Because if you're just like, all right, I'm going to throw this, I don't feel good about it. No. I'm pretty sure this dude's going to hit it into the gap somewhere. Like, you're better off shaking off 10 times and getting to something that you're actually confident with.
Completely agreed.
But was that hard as a rookie? Like, is that hard your first month in the majors? Or are there some guys who maybe have the personality of like, just eyes ahead, do what they say? Or do you feel like I have to take control of my own career at some point and do what I think is going to be the most successful, even if you're disagreeing? But I mean, I'm sure it helps that you do have catchers who are like telling you, listen, you don't have to just listen to me every single time, although I'm sure they would like you to listen.
Yeah. They do their due diligence just like we do. So I think my first couple games in the big leagues, it was, don't shake off Christian Vasquez, who's a 10-year big leaguer. He might know what he's talking about.
Right.
Whereas Jeffers,
and then you have Jeffers.
Because your first start in the majors, Jeffers was the catcher.
And guess what? I didn't shake him off one time. I I couldn't even feel my fingers the first time I stepped on the mound. So I left all my trust into him.
Is it? I mean, I guess like from a nerve standpoint, you had been up a couple times briefly. I remember you pitched against the Tigers going back a couple years. That was your debut, right? Did that help in terms of getting your feet wet a couple of times? That by the time you got called up, I'm sure there were nerves because anybody would be nervous.
Right.
But did it help? Like, okay, I'm past the initial nerves because like I do have the back of my baseball card does have some stats on it already.
Right.
Like,
your first inning in your first start, there were a couple of errors in the field. There was a wild pitch. There was
it was a circus.
It was a circus that ended. That first inning finally ended on a double play where there was a throw out at the plate that Rocco had to challenge.
I was like,
Rocco challenged it to get it, right?
Yeah.
So nerves are gone. I got to be gone after that.
Oh, yeah.
Point.
After that, I was like, okay, I sit down on the bench. I was like, well, we're here. Welcome to it. So, yeah, I'd say after the first inning, definitely after the first game, it definitely kind of rest at ease and say, okay, just go back out there and go do it again.
Did you have the thought, like, midway through that, as it's maybe not even your own doing, that things are going a little haywire, did you have the thought of, like, am I not going to make it through this inning?
I was like, I might not make it through. Exactly. I said, I may not make it through this. I don't know. But then I was like, you go back out there, you're like, I'm going back out? All right, let's go. I'm going back out again? All right, let's go.
Is that one of those you get to the bench, it's like, don't make eye contact. They can't take you out if you don't make any eye contact.
I just think I was so zoned out that I couldn't even come back to life for that first inning. And then after I realized, I was like, well, I got to go back out again. It's the second inning. I got to go back out.
Yeah, you dump all your adrenaline.
Oh, absolutely. I was like,
I was a starter.
I got to go back out. And I was like, well, after that one, it was okay. Like,
and the second inning is when you did get your first strikeout.
Yeah, we started settling in. Yeah. So,
do you remember who your first person you struck out was? We like playing this game. We like playing the trivia game.
You like playing this game.
That's right.
Because you have the answers.
His first name Victor.
Victor Reyes.
Yes,
that is correct. That is correct. That is correct. Yeah. At Detroit.
Yeah. Now, I will say,
fastball up and away.
We've had, okay, that's all right. That's good. Because I was about to say, now we've had some guests who pitched in the 80s or the 90s.
That is correct, and I asked the same question. And they do remember, like, the first game.
Yeah.
They don't always remember the second game. The details on the second game are a little fuzzier.
Yeah, for sure.
Was there anything, your first full season, was there anything that, like, surprised you? Like, I don't mean, like, that you had success, because I think you figured you were going to have success, especially with the stuff you showed up in spring training. But was there anything, like, you're a few months in and you're like, all right, that was easier than I thought, that was harder than I thought, or that was different, even, like, from a lifestyle standpoint in the majors?
Hey, these are the best hitters in the world, okay? So I don't give them too much credit, but I give them credit, all right? I give them credit because you are doing one of the hardest sports in the world, facing against the hardest hitters in the world. So I don't take anything for granted, and I'm truly blessed that I was able to just make it through a full season and doing the thing that I love the most. So I think thank you, but I don't try to look back and go, oh, that was real easier than I thought, because it's every day I learned something new. Every day I had a new challenge. Every day I bounced off of the whole rotation as we sat together day in and day out, learning from Pablo, learning from Bailey, learning from Joe.
It is a good group.
It's a good group. It's a great group. So just being able just to be the fly on the wall sometimes as Pablo's throwing a bullpen, that's the stuff I take in more and say, okay, I'm part of this rotation. So let me go in and actually ask questions about what these guys are doing, because these are masters at art. So at the end of the day, I have to go in and just be a fly on the wall sometimes.
And I do think maybe a few years ago, I think Sonny's first year, which would have been 3 years ago, I guess, there was a lot of talk of, like, the starters are going to watch each other throw.
Yeah, right.
And that I didn't realize
together.
That's sort of uncommon, or it's not all 30 teams aren't doing that.
Right.
And I'm sure there are some days where it's like, are we going to do this again? We got to But if you can pull little knowledge, that's, by the way, speaking from my personality, I'd be like, I got to go watch this guy throw a bullpen again. But if you come up with one thing per season,
Absolutely.
Or you can get through one inning that you maybe wouldn't have before.
Right.
And then the other thing is, once you become, like we joked about, you become more of the veteran, because there's going to be plenty of young pitchers coming up this year, next year.
Yeah, we got some good talent.
The Twins have some good guys.
Yeah.
And if you can be one of like the welcoming committee instead of a fellow rookie at that point, I feel like that adds to it too. Because, I mean, we saw this when you were a kid or even before you were born, when John and I were watching, the Ron Gardenhire group. There were always 3 young guys in the rotation every year.
Right.
And it didn't have to be a weakness. It could be a strength in a lot of ways, particularly when, if you learn stuff from your rookie year. So I think, we asked like from a durability standpoint of how you build on the rookie season. But do you think just a comfort level will be, like, you're not going to be surprised by anything?
Right.
You realize the number 9 hitter in any lineup was the cleanup hitter at AA. Like, you've already sort of gotten that information.
And not only that, but just the little things like traveling, learning how to sleep schedule on different time zones, learning the different mounds and different stadiums, like just the little tips and tricks of, okay, I felt really good when I went from San Francisco, but we had to go take a trip to New York. So it's like, okay, how do you recover? How do you sleep? How do you learn like the little things of it? And I think that's what I was really fortunate enough is to have these guys around me say, hey, watch when you're doing this, make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're going over here and you're doing this, get your sleep, do this. So I had some really great mentors along the way too.
You mentioned the mound. I'm amazed. There's always like a player survey every year, and it's like, what's the best mound? And it's always Tampa Bay. I didn't realize till reading and talking to some of the pitchers that there are like tangible differences.
Oh, for sure.
And I know they're all supposed to be the same. Yeah, but whether it's mound height, how it's sort of built up, or as simple as like how tall the grass is on the infield.
I will tell you they're not the same.
Right. But do you think like the difference between the most pitcher-friendly mound and the least pitcher-friendly mound, like if you had to spend a whole season on the most friendly and then a whole season, do you think it would be like it would affect your ERA in a way where you're like?
I wouldn't say ERA, but definitely your body. Like there's some mounds that I might get sore in different places than the other mound. So it's learning where you would get sore periodically and kind of learning your recovery routine through that. And say, okay, I got to go play a game in Pittsburgh. I got to go play a game over here in Chicago. And kind of mentally prepare yourself for what you're going to be dealing with.
How's the target field? Like, where does the target field mound
it's up there. It's up there.
Up there on the good side.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The last thing I want to talk about.
I was going to say, speaking of flying cross country, we got to get him on the phone.
Okay.
So you got to get the last question.
When they first traded for you, I think we did like a Zoom with you at the time.
Oh,
because you learned, you learned of this. Where did you learn you were traded to the Minnesota Twins? And at what time of the day?
Let me tell you guys this. I was in Tokyo, Japan at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was
during the season?
Yeah, during the season I was playing in the Olympics. And playing for Team USA, yeah. Go America. Go America, yeah. We lost to Japan, sadly. But, yeah, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was on a cardboard bed that they made for all the athletes. One of the best beds I ever slept on, by the way. But I got my phone rings, and it was the GM for the Blue Jays, and then shortly after, the Twins called. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, something's telling me to answer this phone call. I don't know who it could be, but something's telling me to answer this phone call. Sure enough, I get a phone call from the Blue Jays. He goes, hey, I know it's late.
You're like, it's early, actually.
I said, actually, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, but thanks. Hey, I just need to let you know, you're actually going to Minnesota. So I know you're in Japan, but can you get your life together over here in the States? So I call my mom, and I'm like, hey, I might need you to take this truck from New Hampshire to Kansas.
Yes, because was New Hampshire their AA?
Yeah.
Blue Jays AA?
Okay. I was AA at the time. I was like, she's like, what? I was like, I'll tell you later, but we just got traded, but I need you to get this car to Kansas. So that's kind of how it went about.
And the weirdest part of that
could have been worse. Could have been Tokyo.
Right.
One of your teammates.
Yeah, Joe Ryan. So
yes,
Joe Ryan. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're giving too good of an answer.
Joe Ryan was actually my roommate during the qualifiers. So we were actually roommates together. And 2 days before I got traded, he was like, well, I just got traded. And I was like, what? Where? He was like, Minnesota. I was like, okay, all right, good. And I was like, okay, next thing you know, next thing I get the call, I'm like, hey, we're teammates.
That was the Twins' Moneyball. Let's just trade for all the pitchers on Team USA.
Pretty much.
All right, you got to get going.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. How about a round of applause?
Thank you, guys. Absolutely.
As we were on stage today, I couldn't help but notice how much nice hair Simeon Richardson and Ryan Jeffers have.
I couldn't help but notice how many people in the audience took what they thought were nice pictures of us. And I just become obsessed with my bald spot in the photos. That happens every year. It's a good reminder. If you're like us,
that's right.
And you could use a little help in the hair department.
Yeah, and you don't want to jump through all the hoops and stuff. Again, we're all about lowering the obstacles here at Gleeman and the Geek. And
we want it to be easy.
Yeah, we want it to be easy. And it could not be easier than to go to hims.com/Gleeman. From your own couch, you can sit and research all the different hair loss treatments that work. They make it very easy for you with doctor-trusted options and clinically proven ingredients. And you can choose how you apply it, whether it's chewables, that sort of thing.
Spray, serum.
And the process is simple, right?
All of the above.
You're going to work with a doctor there, and you're going to come up with a unique solution, and you're going to get everything you need to try and tackle your own hair loss desires.
Yes, mine is a broken tackle. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS. hims.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/Gleeman. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride.
That's right.
Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
Aaron Gleeman, I was so excited today to see that I get to do a spot for Factor, for our sponsor Factor, because I just had one of their meals like last night.
How was it, Jim?
It was fantastic. It was the spinach and mushroom creamy chicken thighs. Oh my God.
Okay.
It was so tasty. It feels to me like who's the guy who was originally started Apple?
Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs, yeah. Steve Jobs has that hack where he just wore the same thing every day.
I do that.
Like you could just do that, right? Right. Yeah, okay.
I wear a blue T-shirt every day.
I feel like Factor is like a hack on that, like for food. Like if you just had Factor food, you'd eat healthy.
Yes.
You'd save time. It'd be like 4 minutes a shot.
But the difference between
it gets delivered to you
is that they have a wide variety
of
options.
True.
You can choose protein-based. You can choose vegetarian. You can choose kid-friendly stuff. You can choose whatever, or you can hand-pick stuff and get it delivered directly to you.
It is so nice having a couple of those go-to options in my fridge. Chrissy tomorrow at lunch doesn't have anything. She's just going to grab one of those. Tomorrow, just before I go to Twins Fest, I want something. I'm just going to grab one of those.
Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off, like the number and then off. And use the code Gleeman50off to get 50% off your first box, and they'll toss in free shipping.
Nice.
That's Gleeman50off at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off to get 50% off plus free shipping.
Our next guest, you have heard him on the radio. You have heard him on TV. Now you will hear him on stage.
What an intro.
Talking with Aaron Gleeman. Cory Provus, can we get a big hand for Cory Provus?
Thanks, everybody. How are you? Happy Winter Meltdown.
That's right.
Doesn't that voice just make you sick?
Man.
That's such a good voice.
I like how immediately he's leading the show now.
Oh.
He's like, hello? Yeah. Which we're better off if we let that continue.
Go ahead, guys. This is great.
So,
can I say one thing, by the way? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. You can say.
I am a Patreon subscriber.
Oh, wow.
San Diego State basketball rules. I was listening the last 60 seconds of the podcast with Dan Hayes. I did listen.
Don't.
Do you have any idea how many people have talked to you about San Diego State basketball in the last?
Well, because you said, hey.
At 4:30 today, there's like 5 people in the that are apparently alum of the team, of the basketball team itself. It's crazy. Gophers, by the way, knocked off Oregon today.
Yeah, they did. Gophers, 3 straight wins.
don't encourage Dan Hayes. Really, just with it. I see him back there, head's just growing by the minute. Hi, Dan.
And it's already a very big head. Look at the size of that thing. It's like an orange on a
Like,
toothpick.
almost exactly a year ago, you came on the regular podcast.
Yeah.
And we were talking. You made a few headlines.
Yeah.
And then later got some shit.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were saying what you had been told, and everybody was under the impression of no blackouts. And I think you had said it before, but then we sort of made you say it 10 other times, and that may have got you in a little trouble. So now I think you're in the clear, because yesterday we were at the media luncheon where Dave St. Peter said no blackouts. So if anybody's going to take shit this time around, if it doesn't happen,
I'm off the hook.
Yes, you're off the hook.
I'm
we're
off the
hook,
hook.
more importantly.
But the question is, do you want to spread any other disinformation?
Yes. Is there any other
fake news I can throw out there right now?
overly optimistic, fan-friendly things that may or may not come to fruition?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are optimistic that with this new television package, we'll have anywhere from 12 to 15 over-the-air games.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
This is going to get him
don't
in
know,
trouble.
don't know the channel yet, but 12 to 15 over-the-air games.
Do you know if they have officially declined or accepted our offer to put games on Patreon for $1 a game?
Hey, man, when you lose $60 million in television revenue, make them an offer, bro. Nothing bad can happen there. Just give them an offer.
I can't help but notice that for $99.99 for a year, for 162 games, the games are cheaper than a Patreon episode.
But a lot of them are less time than a Patreon episode. Also. Because now many people out there may be saying no one would benefit more from a pitch clock than me. Or, well, John doesn't really need a pitch clock. So the other thing you said when we first talked to you about the move you were making from radio to TV last winter was that you were doing it in part because you wanted to sort of challenge yourself. Like, you were comfortable on radio, you were good at radio, you could keep doing radio forever, probably, but you felt like, if not now, when? And why not do it? So after a year of it, are you happy you made that leap, challenged yourself, and are you like, that was the right move? I will say, as somebody who watches at least road games, I am happy you made the move. I'm happy you challenged yourself. I think most of the people...
Very kind. I love the move. I have no regrets, no second guessing about doing that. Now, I didn't know this, is the whole carriage issues that we had last year, and when the team was playing well, nobody could see it. And then when they solved that problem, the team sucked. So it just was like it couldn't have gone worse in terms of timing of the ebbs and the flows of the season. But no regrets. Doing radio all those years, I rarely ever listened back to anything, just move on. But last year I did watch myself more than I ever had listened because I was curious, was I talking too much? And the answer was yes. There were times when I would notice in April that I'd go back and watch a game and I would say too much about a routine fly ball, or I could just say less, let the images tell the story. And I, as the season went along, I got better at that. But yeah, there were moments when I was just saying, hey, dude, peel back. It's a visual medium. Let the pictures tell the story and just get on to something else.
But that's to be expected. I mean, and in fact, I think you expected it. I think in the podcast last year, you talked about a lot about how that was the challenge you were going to face, right?
Yeah.
And it's something you're not going to be able to do on day one, and it's probably not something you can do after, umpteen years of radio that you're going to be able to do on day one of year two either. Like, it's going to be something that I would think is going to be a constant battle for somebody who has been in the role of radio play-by-play for, their adult life.
I mean, a baseball game, college football, and I've done plenty of TV, and at the end of a college football game, I was exhausted. It just felt like I had a lot of voices in my head, not just me, but my analyst, sideline reporter, producer, director. I mean, all this is going on, folks, while you're talking. You're trying to finish a play, finish a sentence, and you're trying to get the names and numbers and yardage right. While that's happening, in my head, I'm hearing layout, replay, first down, gain of 8. It's just, you're trying to finish sentences while somebody's talking to you. And it's not easy. It's something that, unless you do it and do it enough, then you can get used to it. So at the end of a football game, I was like, I'm tired, great, do it again in a week. But baseball is like, we're doing it again in 12 hours. It was like, man, so there was a fatigue factor, which I didn't anticipate, that I just felt a bit more drained doing television than I did doing radio.
Were you sick of having to dress up to come to the ballpark?
I was like, we're the only people in these jackets and ties. It's like, what? It makes no sense. I hated it. Yeah. I hated it. And then, so I would always bring I'd wear in the clubhouse or on the field in the summer days. I'd wear my own shirt, my own like short sleeve shirt, and then I'd change and put on the Bally dual fan, whatever that was at night. It was a different story. That material was not very comfortable. So I just make the costume change and have a flex off with Danny in the booth next door. We do a little pose down. But yeah, I never enjoyed that. No.
Well, and it changed depending on day of the week and the time
weather.
too.
There was
some days you guys were polo shirt. Yeah. Some days you guys were sport coat. Right.
There was like a temperature like guideline that if it was below 86 degrees, then we had to wear a jacket. But if it was higher than that, then we could. I mean, this just seemed like such an arbitrary number. I mean, how about we just look normal and wear a golf shirt and be comfortable?
Would you like a Twins Daily T-shirt hoodie? Yeah.
Be happy to put
T-shirt
that on.
weight hoodie? Sure.
It's a very nice shirt.
Sure.
Big fan.
Nick, you can give him yours.
Yeah. Thanks. Parker can definitely order you. What did I call
short
it?
sleeve shirt.
Yeah, the softball coach shirt.
Yeah, he's wearing it today.
It's a good look. The other thing, last year, not only were you new in that role, but you guys added Plouffe to the mix. You had Morneau was still the primary announcer, but did he do maybe half, something like that? Roughly?
Yeah, around half. That's not about right.
And you guys had, and it's going to be the same plan this year. You guys announced, I think, 5 total. Denard was his first year doing
Denard did
games.
great his first year. Then Trevor Plouffe is back, and Glenn Perkins is back, the Troy Hawkins, and Morneau.
What was your experience? I personally am a big believer in that because I feel like not just with Twins games, but, watching MLB extra innings or whatever late at night when I come home, I like the kind of freshness that it's not just the same guy for 160 games or whatever, because no matter how intelligent and how many good stories you have as an analyst, you're going to run out. Believe me, I ran out of stories like 7 years ago on this podcast. But did you feel like that helped, hurt, didn't really have a difference of like, we are cycling through kind of a rotation here with you? Was that, as your first year, I guess you didn't really know different, but I mean, it was a lot different from radio where you were paired with Gladden 100-plus games a year, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I learned throughout the year that, and we rehearse some things for the pregame show because there's some graphics that pop up, but what I loved about radio was that it was all spontaneous, and I didn't want that to change. Yes, there's going to be some pre-prepared graphics, but a lot of it we'd see, but I want it still to be organic and just flowing freely on a telecast, so that if I throw something at, Justin or Hawk or Perk about a certain trend or a certain number, I want not this prepared statement. I want them to think about it, give it a pause, let a pitch be thrown, and then go. And I thought that came across. Like Glenn Perkins, what I love about where his brain works is not just pitching, but if he wasn't a baseball player, he was going to be a math teacher. Truly, he was going to be a math teacher. And he loves numbers. And I could say, okay, we look at Baseball Savant, and we're trying to see with a certain pitcher's slider or sweeper, what's different this year as opposed to, we got in this with Pablo a lot last year when we broke down Pablo. The results were not the same with the sweeper. And so asking Perk to explain the why, he could bring it up and then work with our producer a little bit and maybe show some footage, build a graphic, and that, to me, worked. So letting these guys, setting them up to just knock it down the fairway and have the conversation, and it's okay if I don't say, here's Correa, ground ball to short, 2 down, we can see it. Right. You can all see that Correa just grounded out. If they're in a thought, keep going. I mean, we could all see, it's not radio where you have to jump on somebody and call the play. TV, if you're onto something, go. And I thought we did that well.
I remember, like, in the middle of the season, I tried to pay you guys a compliment by saying it sounded to me like a podcast vibe. And I had to clarify because I think people were like, why are you saying they're a podcast? That's not impressive.
Why would you denigrate them like that?
To me, there's no higher calling in life than hosting a podcast.
Yeah.
But to the normal person, but I think that's what you're saying is like it got conversational, not in a way where you guys were just fooling around, but in a way like you flash a graphic up, and as you said, it wasn't just a prepared 2 lines. It was like, let's actually talk about this for 20 pitches.
During the winning streak, White Sox Angels, that's when it came out. Because all of a sudden we see this, in the dugout, we see this, I thought was a big piece of salami. I didn't know what this thing was. And I thought I was in a deli, Katz's Deli here, and seeing a big salami stick hanging behind the counter. And then we're like, what is that? We start diving, unless we're looking at things, okay, we got this flying meat hitting Carlos Santana in the helmet. What is going on here? Let's do some research on that. And then that shifted to LaTroy Hawkins talking about, a charcuterie board. He thinks of that as like an adult Lunchable. It's like, okay, this is funny. The game is lopsided. Let's just see what happens. And it became really fun. Yeah, the team was playing well. But then with Plouffe and Hawk during that winning streak, I thought it was really entertaining television. I thought it came across really well.
I do think there's a benefit to having, if you're going to have a mix of people, I think it's good generally to lean more on recently retired players.
Yeah.
Especially given how data and information and the way we evaluate players has changed so rapidly. A guy who played in the 70s or the 80s they're going to have great stories for sure. But they're not going to have the same ability if you flash that up on the screen to be like, oh yeah, this is how I handled this. This is how I was introduced to this or whatever. But I also think you benefit from having hitters and having pitchers. And that may seem really simple, but like it keeps you from having to go down the same path multiple different series. Because you go, okay, we're on the road, LaTroy's in the booth. Well, you're going to have a much different conversation with LaTroy Hawkins than you would with Trevor Plouffe, let's say.
Yes.
Just because of their experiences. And I really feel like that was a very good part of the broadcast that maybe 10 years ago or something wasn't there. And then the other thing I'll give credit, I talked to, I think his title was just producer, Ricky Palermo.
Yep, Rick Palermo.
One of your guys. And I remember talking to him in the middle of last year about which stats you guys choose to flash up, which conversations you choose to have. Because like you said, you'll say, oh, let's talk about this today. You won't necessarily map out the whole conversation. But there were a lot of subtle things that I felt like you guys did this past year, even as simple as we're going to show the day's lineup. And instead of showing batting average for everyone, we're going to show OPS.
Right.
And it's like, that may seem really simple, but how can you ever get a casual fan to care about OPS or to accept OPS if you're never showing it to them? And then the other key thing, and this is what I talked to Ricky about, was at the bottom, more often than not, you guys would put the league average. And I think that, I didn't even realize how big that was. Because if you don't know what OPS is, and you've been watching Twins for 40 years, and every time they put batting average up, and then all of a sudden you look and it says, Carlos Correa, 850. You go, what the hell am I looking at,
Sure.
850? And even if you know in your head that's OPS, is the league average 500? Is the league average 1,000? And that sounds really simple to do that, to choose that stat and to put it in the context. But I think it makes for a smarter fan base long-term. And I think it opens up you guys to have conversations where you don't have to start every game explaining the same thing. You can almost like pick up where you left off, at least once you're a couple months into the season, and be like, all right, now probably our audience knows this. Maybe we've done the 101 stat head stuff. Now let's get a little bit deeper depending on who your analyst is for that game. We can start doing the advanced level stuff and get into deeper conversations.
The one that we pushed at the start of the season was run expectancy. So we called it was the Bally bar, lower right on the screen. And so run expectancy, to me, I thought that's a really good thing to flash. And, bases loaded, nobody out, you're expected to score 2.3, I think it was 2.3 runs that inning. I like that. And I would reference saying, hey, as you can see on the Bally bar, bases loaded, nobody out, Twins are expected to score more than 2 runs this inning. Let's see how it plays out. And I get some flack from people being like, we could see it. I'm like, but are you looking at it? I mean, you're looking at the pitch, you're looking at the batter, you might be looking at the score, and there's a lot of information flashing there in the lower right. So when I would say, hey, as you see on the Bally bar, take a look at run expectancy, I wanted to drive people to that for a reason, because this may be the pivotal inning that wins you or loses you that game if you don't maximize that opportunity. So when I brought up the Bally Bar, I wanted it to be impactful, and that could probably, at the end of the day, decide who won the game or not.
Well, I mean, run expectancy, especially, you want to call that out because people don't know what run expectancy is. Like, it's kind of self-explanatory, but only if you think about what the word expectancy is, which is not necessarily that clear. So, looking at 2025 then, I presume you guys are already starting to talk about what the broadcasts are going to look like on twins.tv. Any additional things that you're kind of hoping that you're going to see more, be able to lean on more in the broadcasts, or with the new level of control that might come from the Twins have a, I think, greater level of control of this broadcast than they did. They're not negotiating with another party on what works or doesn't work, etc. Anything that you're looking forward to in 2025?
Yeah, we're going to have some new cameras this year. We're going to have what's called the Megalodon camera, which is kind of like a hero shot camera that if you play MLB The Show and all that stuff, it's a guy hits a home run, he crosses home plate, he's in focus, the camera's right there, he's in focus, the crowd might be out of focus. It's a really neat angle that is kind of like a steady cam. You see that with football.
Megalodon?
Well, it has an official name, but I don't know what it is. That's what I knew it as doing football. So we're having that, but then also you're going to see, I don't know how many of you have watched like a Mariners game where they have this great cable cam that kind of goes from the left field foul pole and just kind of goes down the right field line, first base line. So again, as a player is rounding second base, you see this angle from this upper third base look, and it just kind of goes on a track. We're adding that as well this season. So a couple little production elements that I think you'll notice. What I also think is pretty cool is that this year, rain delays. And as much as I love seeing Trevor Plouffe playing wiffle ball and highlight, whatever they were doing, right? It was cool. We're going to bring you, hey, we're rained out, or got a rain delay here in Kansas City. Let's check into the Saints. They're playing at home right now. Let's take in the Saints Rochester game and watch Emmanuel Rodriguez. Watch that. Or go to Double-A and see Walker Jenkins, how he's doing at a game in Wichita. So we'll go to that. We'll show you some other Twins affiliates and some prospects. This great farm system that they have. Let's go show you those guys. So we're going to do more of that.
Because their broadcasts are on MILB TV.
They're on some streaming platform, and we just more or less take their signal and go.
Because it's all under the MLB Media or MLB AM umbrella. So, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I was also happy to see, and I'm sure you were too, that there was some uncertainty. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of the offseason is you guys are offering the direct-to-consumer streaming, which they announced yesterday, $99 a year, all that stuff. But there's also a yet-to-be-revealed details about cable and satellite, because the expectation is, and we've seen this in other markets, that if you have Comcast or you have DirecTV, there is going to be a channel set aside. It won't be the channel that it was last year, but some teams have done that, and it basically goes live 10 seconds before the first pitch,
right,
and it goes dark 10 seconds after the final out. I was happy to see that the Twins are going to be doing pregame, postgame. There's going to be some situations, I think, on the road where it's not as prevalent as it was in the past, but Audra's back as your sideline reporter and all that stuff. So I was very happy about that, not just because I think the people involved in that deserve to have those jobs and they do good jobs and are essential parts of the broadcast, but I also think you're trying to build a longer-term audience and fan base, and having a game just turn on and turn off doesn't treat it with enough, gravitas. That's way too big of a word for that. And so I was really happy to see that. And I would say for the most part, in terms of quote-unquote on-air talent, other than Roy Smalley stepping aside and retiring after a lot of good years on the broadcast, it's basically the same crew.
Same crew. And it's going to be a designated channel. And I don't know what FanDuel is on Comcast, but it's going to be right either above it or below it, one would think. It'll be called Twins Television. And I would imagine that there's going to be, if you click on it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll have the Twins logo on it. Right? And then you get closer to game time. I think we'll have a half-hour pregame show for home games, and then it'll be shorter on the road. But, Audra's going to travel, so she'll be with us and, doing pregame, also in-game reporting and doing a great job that she does. And Katie Storm, at the desk with Timmy Lauds. It's a great group. I'm lucky to be with these talented people that care so much about Twins baseball.
Now, from my perspective, the one of the biggest changes of your job switch last year was that the way it works for Rocco Baldelli's pregame media session, like at, 3:30 for a 7 o'clock game or whatever it is, radio goes separate from the beat writers and from TV. So when Cory was on the radio side, Cory would always feel guilty that he was delaying us getting in there because there is no group in the world that can complain about doing nothing like a group of baseball writers. And I'm at the forefront of that. You've never heard anybody complain about just having to stand still for an extra 10 minutes more than me. And then Cory would come out of Rocco's office and he'd go, I'm sorry about that. The big change last year is you got thrown in there with us because now you're part of the TV group. And then we got into a weird routine where you would often be sitting like behind me, sort of.
Yeah, Morno would be at that corner table, yeah.
And Cory always asked good questions. And I must have said one day, like, that was a good question you asked. Like, I'm glad you asked that. So then every day for the rest of the season, as soon as Rocco was done talking, Cory would lean over and he'd go, was that the best question of the day? What was the best question of the day? And most days he got it. There were a few days where he didn't get it, but I was like, I'm going to tell him he got it. And then the other thing I always appreciate running to Cory at the ballpark, it's maybe a little strange for the other people involved. Cory came up with a song for me that is, Aaron Gleeman was the song basically, but if you ever watched the movie Any Given Sunday, the football movie from
what does Gleeman rhyme with?
Willie Beeman. It was the Jamie Foxx character. Right. And so Cory, that's how I would know Cory was around. I'd hear at the end of the hallway, I'm not even going to sing it, but Aaron Gleeman to the tune of, you're welcome to.
Come on.
His name is Aaron. Aaron Gleeman, he keeps the writers. Dreaming, he keeps the ladies.
Okay.
Screaming.
Sure. Now, did we invite you on this live event just so you would have to do that and I could sit here and enjoy that?
There
possibly. But it was like August maybe, and you'd have been doing that all season. And for some reason, we were like in the hallway of the press box, and Morno was standing there when you did it. And he turned to me, he was like, what the F was that? And I said, it says Willie Beeman, Aaron Gleeman song. Like it was just like a thing. And he looked and I said, he does that every day pretty much. And he looked at me like, so I think for this year, Twins TV, new era of broadcasting, you need to find some late 90s, early 2000s movie where there's a way to rhyme Justin Morneau. Now, I didn't think Aaron Gleeman was that easy to rhyme. He figured it out. Justin Morneau is going to be a real tricky one.
It's probably the nickname, though.
But Morney into...
Yeah, you gotta work around that a little bit. But
that's my only note for 2025.
Yeah, all right. I'll workshop that a little bit.
I think we got to get Richard Whitman on this.
We do have some musicians.
We've got some musicians that listen to this podcast, and I need somebody to come up with that song for the podcast for sure.
Here's a very stupid question, even by my standards. It just occurred to me.
All right.
Did you get recognized in daily life more last year than ever before because you were doing stand-up shots every night on TV and they would see versus radio?
Just the ballpark and the airport.
Okay.
Those two places. Ballpark and airport, those two places, it would come up. But again, nobody could watch it. So it was, nobody could see it. So, if you're living in Juneau, Alaska, probably it was big in Juneau, Alaska because they were out of market. But nobody could see the games. So it was, I had this anonymity that was okay.
That's the beauty of podcasting is, and I put my Tommy Lee Jones as my avatar on Twitter. It's like nobody knows.
Not much longer. We're moving to video.
Yeah, John thinks we're moving to video. I think. I don't see either of us getting significally better looking.
Eye candy, folks. Come on, eye candy right here. Come on, once a week, twice a week during the season. Come on.
Nobody.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to have to cut the rate on the Patreon.
Come on.
We pay you $1.
Listen, with Kepler gone, the Twins need some eye candy right now, right? So, fellas, step up.
That's true.
We've got to get him to a...
Let me just ask one question about on-field upcoming season.
On-field, yes. You got it.
So we talked about, the collapse that took place last 6 weeks, ends on a sour note. I do feel like that has sort of loomed because they haven't made any moves, and it's hard to get that taste out of a fan base's mouth when you've done nothing to sort of shake the roster up. And I am a believer in, and most of the projection systems that you look at are painting this as a mid-'80s team, which in the AL Central could certainly be enough to compete and possibly win the division. What is your view, I guess, of the likelihood that this team can kind of just run it back with the same core, but not just the same core, but a lot of the same kind of role players? Do you think that's a realistic thing? It's not going to make people happy in the offseason, but that doesn't matter when the bell rings. If you start winning when the season starts, it works. Like, do you view that as less need for change's sake because of the core, or do you still think if you were running things or you were, talking to Falvey out there, he might be listening to this, who knows?
Yeah.
They still need to make some moves, and there is time before the opening day or even before spring training, obviously.
I mean, I think so much of the downfall of last year and those last, 39 games, that line of demarcation, right, that August 18th date when it all began in Texas, to me, it was more injury, some philosophical. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but just they were throwing out guys that, and I think they would admit, should not be throwing in these meaningful or playing in these meaningful games. It just where they were at. Now you could say, well, they didn't do anything to address that, either at the deadline or a September roster expansion, and that's all very valid. I like this team. I do like this team. I think the 26 guys that they're going to break camp with, that's a good-looking roster to win this division. I believe that. What I've learned here in the last 7 to 10 days was, if you asked me a month ago where was Royce Lewis going to start the year, I thought second base. He's going to be at third base.
Right.
That to me, I was surprised by. So Royce is going to be at third, and Correa is going to be at short, and second base is going to be kind of a mix of Willie Castro and Brooks Lee and Austin. I don't know how much. I think Austin Martin more of the outfield.
Eddie Julian, maybe?
Eddie Julian in there as well, and Jose Miranda at first base. So I like this team, and seeing the rise of starting pitching finally show within the organization. One would hope that means that Louis Varland's going to be gassed in the bullpen. He's going to be just throwing heat in the bullpen where they don't need him to start because they have some depth now at AAA and even below that. So I like this team. I do like this team. It hasn't been a fun offseason. I mean, it's been a boring offseason where they haven't done much to improve the team. What I am more interested in is what will change, if any, philosophically. Where I kept watching the last 2-3 weeks of the regular season with the Tigers and the Guardians and seeing left-handed hitters face left-handed pitching early in the game, I wonder if Rocco shifts a little bit on that and doesn't pull Matt Wallner and Trevor Larnach and Eddie Julian in the fourth inning and says, you know what, I may lose this round, but this matchup's going to look better in the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning, and I'm glad I have that lefty out there. Well, that to me is just one little example. I don't think this team is going to steal 100 more bases. That's just who they are. But I just wonder if they're not going to be as predictable, because I think that was a part of it too. It felt like they were easy to manage against because they played everything by this same script. You bring in a lefty in the 4th inning, that guy's out, It's a hockey line change. And I'm like, you're not seeing that with other teams. Riley Green is batting. Andres Jimenez was batting. All these guys, big-time hitters, are batting, and I wonder if we'll see more of that as opposed to what we saw the last couple of years.
I mean, I do think this goes directly into what we were just talking about in terms of them, whether or not they make a move between now and, let's say, spring training. That may if they don't add a right-handed hitting corner outfielder, I think what you just said is almost going to have to play out that way. If you don't have a reasonably big bat that you would want to pinch hit for Trevor Larnach or Matt Wallner or whatever, and you can argue about whether the guys they had in that role last year, Manny Margot or whoever, were a reasonably big bat. I think in retrospect, probably not. But if they don't bring in anybody for that role, and I asked Falvey about this yesterday at the media luncheon, because he was asked about first base and listed all sorts of internal options, like you said, Miranda, Julian, Willie Castro even, which was a surprise to me.
Right.
And then a minute later I said, okay, do the same thing for corner outfield right-handed bat.
Right.
And he went,
Austin Martin.
Yeah, Austin Martin, Michael Hellman.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to denigrate those guys.
Right.
But it's not the traditional guy you would want to bring off the bench if you're going to take a Matt Wallner out or a Larnick out or fill in the blank out. And so I do think unless they go out and add a Randall Grichuk type of guy, I do think they're setting themselves up, whether it's by necessity or design, to let things play out in the early innings because that maybe they think it's what they were too extreme on that front, or maybe they just think if we don't have the pieces from like a chess game perspective to make the move, it doesn't benefit us to just make the move to make it. So that is one thing I would expect to be a little bit different. Because like you said, they don't really have the personnel to be like, we're going to run constantly this year. They're still going to look to try to hit for power. They're still going to do a lot of the same bullpen stuff. That is, I think that's right. That's the one thing that I wouldn't be shocked if it changed meaningfully.
And the idea, too, and the Margot comp, it wasn't working. And you're like, banking, okay, he's 0 for 28, but this 29th at bat, it's going to finally click.
He's due.
He's due, right. And the whole idea that he hits left-handed pitching, fine, in a starting role. If your average pinch hitter is hitting well below 200. So if you have a guy that over his career is really good against lefties, that's fine. But then those numbers have to come down. Separate those numbers.
There's a pinch hitter penalty.
Yes, that's about a 100-point-plus drop in batting average, one would think, if you're asking that same guy to come in cold and post those same numbers. It's not going to happen.
Now, I will say this, and then I'll shut up and you can leave. But because all three guests, I feel like, have gone above and beyond, including Cory.
I don't have a flight. I live here, but I just have my son's in a basketball tournament.
He's just
basketball tournament, yeah.
But here's the thing. On the Manny Margot front, I didn't really get that signing. Anybody who listens to the show knows by like June, I was like, what are we doing here? But once you get to like 0 for 25, 0 for...
Punt.
I say go for it. If you're going to be a Bear, be a Grizzly. If you're going to go 0 for 27, don't be the fifth worst
see what happens.
Pinch hitter in the history of Be the worst pinch hitter in the history of baseball. And he accomplished that. And, well, I guess I was going to say no one could ever take that from him, but someone could go 0 for 31.
And please welcome Manny Margot, everybody. Here he is. There he is.
All right. Cory, thank you, as always.
Hey, guys, you're the best. Hey, how about these guys, man? You guys love the Twins.
Thank you so much.
And look at all these people here. Keep up the great work. Really.
Thank you so much.